Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be filming my April wrap-up. For the first time ever, I participated in a readathon this month, which was the O.W.L.s Magical Readathon created by G over at Book Roast. I'll leave the links down below so you can check it out for yourself. It was a really fun month for me. I have never read something according to a stack before, like my TBR. I'm usually quite a mood reader, so I enjoy just picking up whatever is around. But this time around it was really fun to just choose the particular books that I wanted to read for particular prompts for this readathon, so that was really fun. In total, I read 19 books this month. Most of them were quite short and mostly irrelevant to talk about, so today I'll be only mentioning 12 that coincide with some of the prompts for the Magical Readathon. My chosen career for the readathon was to become a trader of magical tomes, which is basically a bookseller, and with a proficiency in magical shop management. And I can say that I have completed both of them, and going on to August, when the second part of this readathon will be happening called NEWTs, that's when hopefully I'll be completing my chosen profession. So these are the books that I read in the month of April. There's a couple of ebooks as well, so I'll be mentioning them as well. So let's get started. So the first book that I completed this month was Lanny by Max Porter. This was for the subject of Transfiguration, which was to read a book that has shapeshifting in it, and the shapeshifting came from one of the main characters in the story. His name was Dead Puppet Toothworth. Lanny came out last year, and I read Max Porter's first book, which is called Grief is a Thing with Feathers, and it was absolutely brilliant. So I should have been more excited to pick this up when it first came out, but for some reason I didn't. So when this Magical Readathon came around, I thought, this is perfect. I don't really want to pick any other books up for that particular prompt, so I thought, I'll read this. I was a bit unsure first about this entire novel. It's structured differently to his first one. It still has that magical feeling to it. It's all about this boy called Lanny and his family that moved outside London to live in a little village. And Lanny is quite a different boy. He is quite whimsical, full of life, full of laughter, and people find him a bit weird and they don't like him. And his parents are trying their best to provide him with the best life he can have. And then suddenly he goes missing. We never get to hear from Lanny himself, but we follow his mum, his dad, Dead Puppet Toothworth, who is like a village kind of spirit that lives in nature. It's quite a fun, different story, and it's divided into two parts. The first part is quite long. You don't know where you're going with it until the second part, and the second part you just speed through so quickly, and when it all comes together, it was such a beautiful novel if you really give it the time of day. But otherwise, I don't know if I would have liked or would have picked it up otherwise. It has some very beautiful quotes and definitely has that Max Porter charm to it. I ended up giving Lanny 4 stars. Next up, I finished up a book that I was reading during April, but I never managed to finish. I read it as an ebook, so I don't have a physical copy with me. I'm glad that I don't. I know it's quite a horrible thing to say, but it's called Diary of a Confused Feminism by Kate Weston. The only reason I read it was because it was for our book club pick for March, but obviously because of the current situation, the book club never happened, so I still decided to finish it up. It's a story about this girl who is basically trying to be a good feminist. I think she's 16. It's a coming of age story, but it was just so bizarre. It read as if it was a younger version of The Diary of Bridget Jones, if anyone has read that. It was funny at times, but at the expense of the main character, and I think our main character came across a bit dumb most of the time. And if people really are like that when they are teenagers, oh my goodness, I would have not survived high school or school of any sorts. My experience as a teacher was not like this, so I don't know if that's what the children in the UK experience, I guess. I was quite amused at some points, quite embarrassed at others, and mostly I was just trying to get through it. It's a long book, and it does feel like it when you're reading it, so I am not disappointed that I read it, but I literally don't even remember the main characters' names. So I did not use this for any prompts for the Magical Readathon because I started in March, so I just finished it up. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. Next up, I read the sequel to Eve of Man by Giovanni Tom Fletcher called Eve Illusion. I mentioned this in my book haul. This completed my charms assignment, which was to read a cover with the white on it. I know it's a bit of a creamy white, but I consider it still white. I really enjoyed this book. This is a follow-up to the first one, which is a story set in a dystopian future where there have been no girls born for 50 years, and then suddenly one is born and they name her Eve. They put a lot of pressure on her. They want her to grow up thinking the world is amazing and beautiful, but they keep her locked up in a tower, sort of kind of a Rapunzel setting, and she is basically being brainwashed into believing something that isn't real. And we have two main characters. It's Eve and Bram is one of the people who works for this society, this government who is controlling her. In this, we follow the story right after the first one ended. I thought this was a great sequel. I was really excited to read it, and it did not disappoint. I flew through this chunk of a book in maybe a couple of days, and it was exciting. It was a little bit different. I don't necessarily like how our main character Eve develops in this book, but that is my personal opinion. But I really would recommend this series if you're looking for something different to like your standard Hunger Games, but if you like a kind of dystopian setting. I ended up giving this a strong 4 stars. Also this month, besides reading, I caught up on quite a few TV shows, and I mentioned it in my anti-haul in my previous video that I was watching The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. And I was reading the graphic novels at the same time. This is The Umbrella Academy, The Apocalypse Suite by Gerard Way and Gabrielle Barr. So Gerard Way wrote the story and Gabrielle Barr very beautifully illustrated it. It's a really unique story, I would say. I think the main issue that I've always had with this particular cover and the idea of the Umbrella Academy is that this is a spoiler. This is literally what happens in the last half or even quarter of the story, so we basically get spoiled for it straight away. And I am glad that I went into the show quite blind, not knowing much about it, because I would have been spoiled and would have not enjoyed, because this reveal in the series really didn't work, but in the books and graphic novels it really did, and I think it came across a bit better. The show developed other characters a bit better, but I think they did a fantastic job bringing this to life. I didn't necessarily love this. I thought that obviously the art is gorgeous, but I think the storytelling was a bit rushed. The characters a bit underdeveloped and not much happened. It's quite short, and obviously it's a graphic novel, but I feel like there was just something missing from it for me. So I used it for the assignment of divination as to choose a random number generator and pick this book. I kind of cheated and didn't do it, but it's a randomly selected book. Then I read the sequel, which is called Dallas, Volume 2, and Volume 3 that came out last year, called Hotel Oblivion. This one I thought it's a bit worse than the first one. I didn't really like it. They obviously took inspiration from both of the volumes for the series, but there is something about this series that just really, I don't know, it just doesn't click with me. I don't even know what it is. It's just really unsettling. I don't think I'm going to be picking up any more in the series if they aren't coming out. I would just rather stick to the TV show. The third one completely disappointed me. I think that was probably one of the worst ones. It really didn't have a strong story, strong characters, or strong villain, really. And I understand it has taken a long time to come and get here, but it's just really not worth your time, in my personal opinion. Obviously, they are great staples in the genre, but so I gave the first one 3.5 stars, the second one got 3 stars, and the third one got 2.5. Next up, I picked up The Love Affairs of Nathaniel P. by Adele Waldman. This has been in my possession, I think, for at least 6 years. I bought it when I used to work for my old job, and I went into the Dawn's bookshop once and I picked up 6 different books, and I only have 2 of those left because I unhauled the rest because I don't know why I picked those up. I would have never read those actually at that kind of age as well. I was quite young. This particular book I used for the prompt of ancient runes, and it's the Heart Charm, which had to be a book with a heart in the cover or the title, and this is literally one of the few books that I own that fit that prompt, and I thought it would be a good time to give it a try and read it finally. It's blurred by Lena Dunham. I know a lot of people have problems with Lena Dunham, but I quite enjoyed the Girls TV show that used to run quite a few years ago. I didn't get along with her writing, but I think this doesn't speak for any of the other people. This is a story of Nathaniel, who is a Romanian immigrant in America, and he is just basically going on about his life and dating around, sleeping around. I need to mention before I continue that this is an 18+ adult book. It has scenes of sex and relationships, so just be aware before you go into reading this. I didn't expect to like it at all, to be honest. It's not something I usually pick up. General literary fiction just leaves me kind of depressed or wanting more, or doesn't usually fill me or fulfill me at all. But this was a really, really interesting look. I think had I read it at any other time in my life, I would have not appreciated it. But during this read, I think I'm in the right age, and I think I have the right amount of experience, so I think this was a really interesting look on how men treat women and women treat men really as well, and how relationships between people can be, and how difficult it is to maneuver liking someone else, and how you can move on from being friends to lovers to being friends or just enemies again. I wasn't really enjoying it for the first maybe 50 to 100 pages, but I realised that maybe I was being a bit too critical of it, and I just started enjoying it, and it wasn't a fantastic read. It's not one of my favourite books, but I think it's still a really, really interesting one, and O.W.L.s hasn't released anything else since this book besides a little novella, and I think it's just a waste. She could have written some great stories, and this, by its feel, reminded me of another book that I haven't read yet, but I've been talking and plugging at my work for quite a long time. So I'll tell you about the other one in a second, but this almost did it a bit better. But let me tell you in a second. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Then I picked up Keeper by Jessica Moore. This is a proof copy that the author single-handedly handed to me at work, which was really kind of her. Thank you so much, Jessica. I used this book to fulfill the prompt for arithmancy, which was to read a book outside my favorite genre, which is probably fantasy or sci-fi. So this is a crime novel. It has been published quite recently in a hardback form. It's a very interesting story. It's set during two different times, so we're following a narrative set then and a narrative set now. Then we're following Katie, who is a young woman living in London, and then she goes back to her hometown because her mum needs some help. She has cancer, so she takes her to treatments and such. And on one night, Katie meets this one boy, and he seems very overly protective and overly oncoming onto her, and they develop this relationship, and it was quite creepy, quite unsettling at times. And then we're following the now perspective, the present time, when Katie has been found dead in a river, and we're trying to figure out what happened. Then parts were brilliant. I was so curious to find out what Katie was like before, and what was she doing, and what might have happened. It was really well written in that sense. But when we came to now, we're following these detectives, and then they're going to this women's shelter, because this book heavily discusses domestic violence and violence against women, and it was quite a important topic to cover. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna disagree with it, but I think this really felt like a debut novel written just for the sake of being written. It had a lot of just overly flowery writing for the first 100 pages, unnecessarily really, and then Jessica finds her way in writing for the second part of the novel. I really wasn't connecting with the now timeline, with the women in the shelter, with the 2 or 3 detectives that are following this case, so I skimmed all of those parts. I never skim books. It's not my way of reading. I really enjoy reading every single word someone's written, but on this occasion just couldn't bring myself to do it. Then parts were fantastic, so I flew through it, I guess. The revelation was quite interesting, but I guess it hit not too close to home for me personally because I haven't experienced anything like that, but I think it was very, very creepy. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars, which is a shame. I think a lot of people will like it, but obviously it handles quite difficult, harsh themes, so just be aware of that as well going forward. So then I picked up Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson, which is a sequel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and is also featured in my April book haul. This is a highly anticipated sequel for me. The first novel was just a brilliant read. I read it at the same time last year, which is quite funny. Last year I was travelling with my boyfriend through Scotland. We were doing a road trip, and this book, or the proof of the first one, came with me, and I had just the magical memories from it, and I was really hyped up to read this. So I purchased my own copy and read it in one night, stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, just basically couldn't stop reading because I felt like if I had stopped even for a moment, not that I would forget what was happening, I just wanted to know. I needed to know what was happening. We're following our main character Pip, who after the first novel ends has been taking time off from the whole playing detective bit, and she has actually done a podcast on the events that happened in the first book. But now something happens in real time. A person close to her goes missing, but no one takes any notice of it because it's something that they do anyway. This person just sometimes disappears for a couple of days and then they return. So most of the people don't care, but Pip has a feeling that something bad is happening. And it was just so masterfully done. It was such an intriguing novel. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is so highly rated. It's one of my favourite books of the year again, and I just can't highly recommend it. I want you to pick up the first book and this one, and I think it's going to be at least 4-book series, so please go and support. It's an English author, but it really reads like it could be set anywhere. Even though it's quite English at some points, I read the first one as it could have been set in America as well. Please go and read it. As it wasn't a part of my main O.W.L.s that I needed to complete, I still decided to add it on to the list. It completed my astronomy prompt, which was to read a book during nighttime, which I did. I read it in one night. So now we're moving on to probably the most hyped up book in the last couple of years that has been released as a literary fiction. It's Normal People by Sally Rooney. I should have read this 2 years ago. When it came out, it was the biggest release. This was chosen as Waterstone's Book of the Year. This has won the Costa Novel Award. It has been huge. Going into work and telling people that I've read it and recommending it was really difficult because 100% if I had read it back then, I would have not enjoyed it. And it seems to be a thing with me. I don't necessarily like the hype, but I also feel that there are right times in life to read certain books, and I think this was the right time for me to read it. Obviously I picked it up because the adaptation was coming out, so I wanted to check it out as well. I do quite like the adaptations. This was an interesting read. You see, when I was talking to you about the Love Affairs of Nathaniel P, I said that this book was quite similar. They are really similar. It's a shame that Adele Waldman's book doesn't get enough praise, because if it had come out at a better, more progressive time, it would have done big things like this one. We're following 2 teenagers who treat each other like shit, but then they kind of fall for each other. And also, this is an 18+ book. It has really explicit scenes of sex. So if you're a bit traumatized by that or sensitive, please be careful going into this novel. It's not all the time, but it definitely has its fair few scenes. And then we follow them throughout 5 years of their life, just growing up, going to college / university, and just kind of figure out their relationship with each other, with other people. I don't know if I'm the only one who likes finding book titles in the book itself, but somewhere around the 67% mark, our main character Marianne says, "Why can't I be like normal people?" And I thought it was really brilliant. The only main flaw that I feel like a lot of people have with it is the writing style, because this book has no dialogue punctuation, no way of telling who's talking when, really. It's just all plain text, but it has obviously commas and full stops. It can be a bit difficult to read at times because you want that break, you want to see someone interacting with each other, you want to hear the thoughts, but if they keep blending into the main story, it just was a bit confusing at times. I was surprised by how much I did enjoy this in the end. They are really unlikable characters. I can't say that you're going to be in love with any of them, because they are quite horrible people. They're not normal people, they're quite horrible people. But I think it had a really interesting look at life and how people treat each other once again. This is a hard novel to read because I think a lot of us will see either ourselves or someone else in it and just think how little things really do change how we treat each other. So really need to be a bit more respectful and a bit more aware of other people's feelings. I surprisingly gave this 4 stars. I guess I liked it. Would I recommend it? With caution, I think. Once again, if you read it at the right time, it might be a good choice. Any other time, you might not appreciate it, or you might say, like a lot of people have said, that they hated this novel. And I can see where they come from, but at the same time, I appreciate what it did. Should have gotten as much hype as everyone was claiming? Probably not, but it wasn't bad. I also watched the adaptation in one day because I'm like that. It's only half an hour per episode and it's 12 episodes, so it was 6 hours of just binge. It was probably the most accurate adaptation of anything, any novel I have ever seen in my life. It's so accurate, it literally takes scenes and lines exactly from the book. There were some omissions from the main story, probably for the better. Most of those bits really didn't feel like necessary anyway. Some of the scenes came across a bit more powerful in the book, but still, I think there was a great adaptation. Really, a lot of sex as well, a lot of graphic sex. But if you're looking for something good to watch, sure, why not? It's really beautifully shot as well. I used this for the prompt of Muggle studies, as to read a contemporary or a book about Muggles. I was meant to read Angel Mage by Garth Nix this month to fulfill my History of Magic prompt to read a book about wizards or witches. I just really didn't feel like reading a 500-page book. So I opted for something a little smaller. For the same prompt I picked up The Adventure Zone, Here Come the Gerblins by the McElroy brothers. It's a graphic novel all about their podcast, which is a podcast about playing D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. I've never heard of the podcast until I picked this up, and obviously I love my graphic novels, and I saw this and I was obviously really drawn into it. Everyone around me has told me that I would enjoy Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not so sure. I love the idea, but I don't know if I will ever enjoy the execution. I thought I would just enjoy the story because it's really beautifully illustrated. It's so magical, so adventurous. Why not? Why not? But here's why. I really didn't like this graphic novel. Oh my goodness, this was probably the roughest reading experience I've had. It's so sad because I obviously want to support everything that's cool, but if something isn't for me, it isn't for me. And I think D&D isn't for me. This was really beautifully illustrated. We're following the main, so the 3 brothers and their 4th brother, who is the dungeon master for them, and they have basically illustrated their adventures as they were playing D&D. Our 3 main characters, Taco, the other 2, who cares? I think if you don't know the podcast, you'll be very confused by this, or at least I was. I guess I'm not very well aware of the terminologies and maybe the gameplay, so I really didn't like it. Maybe this was too sci-fi at the end for me. It's a quick read, but I really didn't get much out of it. I ended up giving it 2 stars, unfortunately, but it did complete my prompt. The last but not least was the book that I read literally with 45 minutes to spare till the end of the marathon, which was on the 30th of April, was The Empress of Salt and Fortune by E.M.O. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's a short novella, 112 pages, and it all tells the story of our 2 main characters, a cleric and sidekick, going to this temple that was the last resting place, but not really for death, so it was confusing, for this empress, and they meet a person called Rabbit, and they just tell the story of the Empress and their experiences with her. It's a very short book, but it's really packs a punch. It was beautiful, but I was really confused for the first little bit because you really don't know who is who, what is happening. It's quite short, it's very straight to the point. I think towards the end, when it all comes together, it really, really was a beautiful read. At the beginning of each chapter, there's a selection of small things, a description of small things that they're looking at, and that was a bit confusing, so I skipped those. I guess they add something to the story, but I really didn't get anything out of that. I think it's one of the stories that you might get more out of the more you read it, and I'm not usually one for rereading things, so I did appreciate what it did for the time being, so I gave it 4 stars. And it completed the prompt for the potions, which was to read a book under 150 pages. So that concludes my April wrap-up. I have come one step closer to becoming a trader of magical tomes with proficiency in magical shop management. But before you leave, I just want to do a little quick unboxing of some of the things that I just bought on Disney on a whim. They were advertising on Facebook like they always do, and I just decided to get a few things. So I want to show you. There's one more thing coming at the end of May, so I might show it to you later. I guess I just want to treat myself for a birthday, maybe. I don't know why I got these things. So the first one is this tiny little Stitch. Look at him. It's a mini Cuddlies Stitch. I don't know, I just thought he was cute, but also I needed something to put into my cart to get the free delivery. He's so sweet. I think I have Stitch in almost every size now. He's not my favorite, but I think his plushies are my favorite. Then I got a couple of these Animators collections of pins, mystery pins, so I thought we'll open them on camera and see what's inside. Should have gotten some scissors, oh god. Watch me struggle for 10 minutes trying to open this. There's a little Tinkerbell pin. I hope you can see it. That's cute. Oh, she's really cute. I have another one. Let's see what's inside this one. So you can get 6 different ones. Oh, bad idea, bad idea. Look at her, it's the Snow White. Look how pretty. That's really sweet. I kind of wanted, I guess maybe I wanted the Aurora and the Jasmine ones, but who cares. And then I got my boyfriend a little present. It's the Star Wars Mandalorian TV show t-shirt. It's really cool. It's a really good quality. I wish maybe the print was a bit better, but we have been huge fans of the show, so I want to treat him to something little. This is the end of the unboxing as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm okay with my reading for April. I think I could have done better. If you like stats, I might do a 6-month wrap-up with all the stats, books I've read and things like that. So let me know in the comments if you'd like that. Thank you for watching, and this is it for me. Bye!